Welcome guys, my name is Yana the Heretic, and this is my channel, The Unpopular Opinion, Becoming Popular. And I'm here to address the gate of the week. It is in transit for 6 days, and it started yesterday around 4:30. Yesterday was June 13th. 4:30 in the morning, Pacific Standard Time. And it is the gate of caution and what we consider standstill. Now, that does sound scary. Like, what does caution mean? It's another one of those throat gates. It's another throat gate linked to the emotional center specifically. And it's saying, I try. And this is where Lakshmi is creating spiritual richness. And we've already experienced, material richness, the richness of skills, being prosperous in beauty, and this is more so being the monk or the prophet. It's really about weighing your words and really making them come out with gravity and impact. This is an individual gate, and it is part of the knowing circuit. And when it comes down to knowing, it's like always this inner process. Like, you speak without needing to think, but that takes time for gate 12, and rightly so, because you don't want something that's worth its weight in gold to fall upon deaf ears, or you don't want to say it in the wrong tone or in a weird body language, because people are going to be very confused about how your words are compared to your body language. Yeah, it can seem difficult. It's difficult for sure for a lot of the emotional people, including myself, to not speak your truth on command. I do not have either of these gates, but I do have my partner with gate 22, which is the polarity of gate 12. That one sounds a lot better because it is the gate of openness and grace. Although it doesn't, happen all of the time, because gate 22 is one that is extremely moody. It is the one at the emotional center, and it's like, wow, I'm in a terrible mood, and your friends are like, yo, you want to come to this party? Like, you can't miss it. You show up and you drink too much and you act a fool, or you tell somebody you hate them, or, get punched in the face, whatever it is, like, you just won't make a great appearance, if you're in a bad mood. And I know that, and I respect when my partner wants to be at home and he doesn't want to accompany me to a show, or, it's just, you don't have the, desire. It's just so heavy, in your chest, in your soul, and it's not going anywhere. It's not going to go away, So when it comes down to gate 22, it has extreme feelings. It knows that it has these feelings. It knows its depth of each emotion, whereas 12 needs to understand that depth, needs to understand what emotions they're feeling. So that's why they can't speak. They try, but then they realize, it's actually better to keep myself from saying anything. And that's where the monk comes in, because the monk wants to keep peace in their life. You know, when it comes down to inner peace, that is the highlight of their life. They don't want to disrupt it for any reason at all. Like, why would I have some, you know, people yelling at me and like threatening me, or, you know, threatening my environment and my peace? You know, I could just keep reserved and just not say anything about that. And the people who are more likely to share my point of view are going to be the ones that understand where I'm coming from. Otherwise, you never know. And then the prophet aspect is more so the manifesting possibility of the throat to create impact. And the prophet or a poet or a philosopher, they tend to weigh the words, you know, they say it falls out of their mouth with such richness, you know, and you get so like impacted by, you know, this philosophy, because of the way that it's coming out of this person. You know that they're wise and they've really thought this through. And it's more so something that they just know. They just feel like it's ever present and true for them. And they live by those standards. So this is the ability to really impact or not, you know? So Gate 12 really highlights the time frame where in 1781 we are no longer seven, what's the word? I just had it on the tip of my tongue. 7-centered beings. We are 9-centered beings since 1781. And that just means that our larynx dropped so that we're able to speak with more tone. We are more articulate, like our voice is hitting way more frequencies so we can be understood much more in depth. And it also allowed us to speak with animals and speak, you know, like registering more sounds that you're capable of. If you're a person that can make bird sounds, if you're a person that, you know, is of Siberian descent and you speak with animals and you sing and you have a ritual doing those things, or even tube and throat singing, whatever it may be, it is this ability to reach these like full body vibrations. You know, tube and throat singing is more like a self-spiritual activation because you can feel those vibrations deep in your chest, you know, and I'm sure the same thing goes for Tibetan throat singing and other throat singing kinds or types. You know, you reach this like vibration and it allows you to expand your consciousness just by doing that one act. It's as if you're tapping into the vibration of everything around you in your environment and nature, and you're resembling those dimensions and frequencies that are around you. So the same thing happens with animals. They know what you're saying. You know, you yell at your cat or your dog and you say no, and they just, you know, put their tail between their legs, or they get all moody and they talk back. You know, it's like these animals now have buttons that they press to respond to you with, and they know what it means. Like this is where we're at. We're able to talk with so much charm or ferociousness if we want to. And together, the 12 and the 22 create the channel of openness. And it is also considered the channel of making music. So it is that ability to pause in the song, you know, and like completely go off track and create something new, or it's the ability to pulse it in this pattern that people love. You know, there's popular songs, there's ones that people never listen to. It just depends on that pulse, the rhythmic pattern of this mood that the artist is in. And it is the ability to embrace the acoustics of your emotional center. And it could be, yeah, extremely self-centered to some, because it's not really a awareness at all. It's more so a pulse, you know, since it is an individual channel. It wants to come out. It's like, you know, you always have to check yourself before you wreck yourself, you know, and really feel deeply where you're coming from. That's why music takes time. You know, you change the lyrics, you're like, yeah, that doesn't actually really make the impact that I wanted it to. And sometimes you will say the wrong thing. That is just the way of the emotional center and what's moody. But the great thing is that, you know, for the most part, you're not gonna get shot at a Western bar. You're not gonna like get hanged or burned at the stake as much in this century as it was in the 18th century. People did stand by their word, and that was impressive way back when, and it was their honor. Now, the awareness aspect of our livelihood and keeping ourselves safe has really been highlighted, you know, but that also makes it so that you can live to see another day, you know. This makes it so that you can be the best, like, undercover detective in the world, because you really wait, you pretend, you are reserved. You know, it's the ability to maybe like pretend, you know, just like, well, I'm gonna pretend I'm not mad at this person for a moment until I can really gain the clarity to do so. And that may seem like a cold shoulder, but at the same time, it's not really about the cold shoulder. It's more about being prepared to be indulgent in those emotions, to break that open, and then maybe not. Like, maybe you'll get over it and it's not as important to you to have to voice your concerns in that way, you know. But it's really about tone and about body language and about the gravity of your words, the grace in your words, the ability to take pause before you unload something extremely impactful. And we do have the channel of openness for most of this transit. And it is such an alive place, you know. So the people that are usually emotionally defined could be feeling a lot more of this energy around them. They could be reserved because they're like, you know, holy shit, like, you know, there's a lot going on. I don't know if I can deal with this all at once. Don't worry, you know, that's why I do what I do, is that I can prep you for the week. It's not like you've completely lost it. It's just that we're really feeding this like imputation of words, this like excessive articulation of what we're trying to embody and say. And wish that there is grace and that there is openness for you all. Let's see. I know that manifestors are the ones that are meant to inform, and sometimes in order to like prove yourself or to make your mark, you can really like hurt some people by not informing them of what you're about to do. And sometimes it is used for the benefit of you because your boss is an asshole, you know, or the company is completely like, you realize that it doesn't actually have great intention, so you leave the company and it like crashes, you know, you leave it in rubble because you were the missing piece that they needed to really make the company work, you know. So you have that as a manifestor, that like ability to really kind of destroy the foundation, if you will, or you have the ability to say only really what needs to be said and nothing more. And it can be hurtful in itself, you know. You can provoke people by saying very little, or you can provoke people by not saying anything at all. It really depends on the way that you hold yourself and the frequencies that are around you that you're embodying. Yeah, it's about self-analysis, and that is why the monk, you know, I really respect the act of meditation, because there's a lot going on in the mind, and I think that the first thing I ever learned was how to meditate, because there's a lot going on, you know, like you have like so many fragments of what you see the world to be, and especially as a young person, and you're like, I cannot grab onto all of these things at once, and boy do I want to. There's only more and more stimulation that is being brought to us every day. There's more distraction to deal with, so I'm sure the mind can be extremely anxiety ridden. And meditation is the monk's practice, you know. They really sit in self-analysis. They really are able to hum or to work on a certain emotion, whether, you know, the hardest ones are always jealousy and self-hatred and, you know, worthlessness. And they're really able to sit with that and try to see the total perception of that feeling. So it is the purification in self-analysis. Let's see, and the purification of an ideal, as well as withdrawal from the world. Yeah. Connection to animals. That's what we're getting this week. The spiritual richness of being alone and being with our own energy, and seeing how that actually is a really beneficial practice. Because if you just blab whatever like you want to come out of your mouth, for the most part, there's a lot of people that are going to get extremely annoyed. And they're going to be like, wow, this person is so selfish in what they have to say. Like, they don't even ask me how I'm doing, you know? They're all just about them in their own little bubble. But this is really calling us to self-analyze, to know the words that are worth their weight in gold. Because it can really transcend your life. The throat has been so impactful, just learning about it and learning all of its voices and all of its experiments, and trials and attempts. And this is one of those that is part of 3 gates of aloneness. So take caution, remember to do that throughout this week. Remember to really, I have an emotion coming up. Am I going to just freak the fuck out? Or am I just gonna breathe and just take it in and reflect? So I'm not saying necessarily that freaking out is bad, because, for me personally, I think that I just would rather speak the truth. I always have this saying personally, where it's, I say it how it is, count on me to take the risk. And I know that that is a choice, that is a choice. And it is one that I believe I have waited on. There are certain things that definitely bother me, and it bothers me most of the time if I don't say it, because I don't feel like I'm really shaping my world if I'm not going to speak my truth. Because, I talk about human design as being the system that carves your path, and the more obstacles that you have to go through, it can create a lot of mental distress and torture, or emotional distress and torture. For the most part, now, as I'm 31 years old, I know how to see a certain type of energy at this point, to where I'm like, okay, I can only hang out with this person, once a year or something, because it's not worth it to me, to undergo so much strain, so much heaviness, so much confusion and chaos. And if I speak on it finally and I say something and that person still stays, I'll see you once a year. But otherwise, what's up, how I'm being truthful and honest with you. So if you keep on doing the same thing, even though you know how I feel, it's just coming at the situation with disrespect. To me, forgetfulness isn't easy when there's a real situation where there's an issue. But seemingly people forget, I choose to carve my path by allowing things that don't resonate with me to fall away. And it's a hard place to be, to be honest. It's painful, because you don't want to just burn bridges, right? You don't want to seem like you're a prude or a prick in any way. But you have to weigh out how patient you can be throughout time undergoing certain things. So, and then speak your truth, Questions to ask of the week. What does spiritual richness look like to you? Is it a daily upkeep? Do you consider yourself spiritual in nature? What does spiritual even mean to you? Is it crystals? Is it writing? Is it singing? Is it dancing? It can be so many different things. It's yoga to some people, it really depends on what it is, people practice. Think about the random mindless things you have said without waiting. What occurrence stands out the most, and what did you learn from it? How good are you at being alone and keeping silent when things get really turbulent in the world? Are you the kind of person that will post, delete me, if you do not follow a certain ideal? Do you think there's another waiting game that could create more perspective and impact than brutal separateness? Now that's a really crazy question for the times right now. We're undergoing political fuckery, and some people really choose to separate. Although I had mentioned, me speaking my truth and allowing things to fall away, for the most part, if there's something impactful that I can actually synthesize within myself, then I'm gonna not delete that person, off of my friends list, because potentially our direction and our perspective can shift. You may hear a bunch of people saying something, and you might want to just try it out. You might want to experience it. And it's just giving people the option. But of course, if you're getting shot at, with all this all these daggers and this verbal abuse and this you're an idiot because you think this way, and I'm Democrat and you're Republican or liberal, whatever it is, we don't see eye to eye for real, then yeah, you should take that time to keep your inner peace, because what's the point of fighting with somebody, especially if it's somebody that's in your family that you love? This shit hurts. It hurts deep. It cuts, because that your political mindset is what's causing separation in the family. That's what happened, during COVID. And it was brutal, Keeping peace at all costs for your own safety is a reality. But for you, do you foresee an exit sign? If not, do you ask for help? So this is honestly why I named my band Cryptic Seed, because I always had to walk on eggshells with my parents. I couldn't say everything that I wanted to say. I couldn't really even be emotional, and I'm an emotional body. So it was just the articulation of just okay, I gotta really think about what's not gonna make my parents mad or feel like I'm disrespecting them. And it became this habit of mine, which created this shell of the not self, where I lied, just to keep myself from being homeless, it's much easier to go out and work and save money rather than to have to think about where you're gonna find money for a car or a home. So sometimes you get caught up in the situation, in a marriage, and a living situation where just because you really want to fight and take your claws and your teeth out, you still have to live there, right? You still have to be there and undergo this process until you can actually find a way out. But definitely ask for help. Ask for advice, if that's you and you don't foresee an exit sign, then ask for help. Thank you guys for listening and watching. This was a very potent last week of Lakshmi, and From the bottom of my heart, I hope that I depicted it from all angles for you. Until next time.